but it just brushes off. Um, Actually, what we're doing with this particular set of pastels is treating them like a pigment. And while the bulk of everything seems to brush off, I've actually had this kit for 5 years maybe now, and I've used it for a whole lot of things and various techniques. So again, this one particular kit has lasted me that long, and or how I treat it, like a pigments. I know those individual little pots of pigments are out there, and I've seen them go anywhere from $8 to $15, and that's just for an individual pot. Well, I'm pretty broke most of the time, so I have to adjust, and I got a lot of my tips and tricks from other content creators over on YouTube, and believe it or not, some of the best content creators that I've seen for their tips for or translating into different media like plastic models are those who actually create minis or little bits of terrain for like Warhammer 40K or Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Just these little bits. And I found using a lot of their really cheap and unique tricks translates really well for plastic models. So real quick, we're going to do this as a tutorial. As you can see, I've got the exhaust installed, but I've achieved that more real look for this particular build. And I'm going to explain to you and show you how I did that with this. Now, I have two kits of Sodbuster. One I'm doing as a tribute build for one of our fellow content creators over on YouTube who passed away. And this one is going to be done up as Patrick Swayze's truck in Red Dawn. So I've got two of them. And I took one of the pieces, or one of the exhaust pieces out of that kit, and I prepped it. Now it took me about 10 minutes to clean up seam lines, flash and molding, and actually open up the end of it just a little bit. But I used Rust-Oleum. I used the flat black primer. Once that was dry, I used metallic silver. But before this was dry, I sprayed matte clear on it. And what I get is this relatively aluminum look. And, you know, this is pretty fair. You can actually use this just as is if you want kind of a showroom ready vehicle. You can do something like this. But when I want use, or to create use, instead of rusting it up, I wanted to give it a little bit of burnt or heat has gone through the exhaust with it. So I will show you in what order I did it. And yes, the bulk of it seems to brush off, but we're treating it like a pigment, so we're actually transferring some of the color to the part itself, and that doesn't brush away. So let me turn this around. I'm going to start with this orange here. Remember, this is Blick Square Pastels 12 assorted earth tones. I'm going to start with this orange here. And all I'm doing is transferring a bit of it to the Q-tip, and I'm rubbing it in. And that's really what I'm focusing on, is transferring a bit of color to the metallic surface that's already been prepared. And the beauty of this, as you're going along and doing it, you can get some of it into the nooks and crannies, and it will actually remain in those nooks and crannies and create kind of that extra tone that you might be looking for. But we're going to sit here and do this for a moment. Make sure we get as much of this transferred as possible. And we do that for the entire exhaust, up and down the exhaust. And when you start wearing out the Q-tip like this, toss it aside, grab you up another one, and get going. Now, yes, you're going to wind up with a little bit of pigment on your fingers, but that's fine because, like I tell my kids, you can wash your hands. But we sit here and we keep going until we've got the entire exhaust covered. Now we've got this, and what we're doing is building up layers. So now we're going to move into something a little bit darker, and what I did here was I went with this darker orange brown and applied it that way. And we'll keep focusing on just this part here, the muffler. Once that's situated, then we do the black. Because each successive layer adds dimension to the previous layer. And you just keep rubbing it in. Now to tie it all together, once all this is done, clean one and this dark brown. And that's how you do it. Now you've got a well-used, worn muffler.